Hello, and welcome back to the next part of our civilians during the Civil War video set. So, where we left off, the Federal Army was occupying Chatham Manor and Stafford Heights across the river from Fredericksburg, Virginia. And then on November 23rd of 1862, the Confederates arrived to defend the town. And battle at that point was absolutely imminent. And so civilians faced that impossible choice. Should they evacuate to homes and camps in the surrounding countryside, or should they stay in their homes, hunker down, and wait out the fighting? Now, again, this is a seemingly impossible choice. Some families did indeed leave, including diarist Jane Beale, who had two sons fighting for the Confederacy, and a handful of other children still at home. Other families ended up staying behind and hiding in their basements. The Battle of Fredericksburg was extremely destructive. As the Union Army was crossing the river on pontoon bridges, they were being covered by 150 cannons bombarding the city. And once they come across the river, we see the first example of true urban warfare in the Civil War, as the fighting occurred in the streets and in buildings of the town. Almost every home or building was destroyed or damaged in some way by this fighting, and the destruction didn't stop there. After the Union Army chased the Confederates out of the town on December 11th, the bitter troops ransacked the town, plundering all of the empty houses and destroying furniture, clothing, paintings, and more. This is considered by many to be the worst instance of looting in the war to that point, and it's also a depressing instance of how war can change people for the worst. Now, the Battle of Fredericksburg also can show us how humane people can be. When Southerners around the Confederacy heard of the destruction of Fredericksburg, they all started sending money, donating money to the civilians to help in their rebuilding process. So, one aspect of the battle that's seldom discussed is the aftermath. Once the troops move out, wounded and dead are left behind in the streets, on farmland, and in some cases in homes. And they were often buried in shallow mass graves. And it's not just the destruction of human life that what had to be taken care of, but many horses were killed in battle as well. And the livestock of civilian farmers in the area were occasionally caught in the crossfire. So much of this cleanup fell to the people who returned to their homes after the army left. And in the case of the Battle of Fredericksburg, many things could be taken care of by the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia. They had chased the Union out of Fredericksburg back across the river to Stafford Heights. And so the Confederate Army ended up making their winter encampment in Fredericksburg and the surrounding farms for the winter of 1862 to 1863. So this illustrates another interesting aspect of the war and how it affected the civilians. Many people in the town welcomed these Confederate heroes onto their lands, and in some cases into their homes. 24-year-old Catherine Corbin and her family lived at Moss Neck Manor outside of Fredericksburg, and the land surrounding the manor was the winter home of General Thomas Stonewall Jackson and his men, very beloved Confederate general. This led to an enjoyable time for this Corbin family. They were very sociable, loved having parties, loved having guests, loved entertaining. And Kate is a main character in my story, Be Strong and Steadfast, so I don't want to give too much information away. And so I just want to kind of give just a little example of this is another way of how these civilians were affected by the war. So the civilians of Fredericksburg were near three other notable engagements of the war, and that is something that I will be talking about next video. We are almost out of town here, and so I invite you to join us again next time as we talk more about the civilians and how they were affected by the Civil War.